The quantum comms burst into static, then silence. Commander Elena Rodriguez watched the holographic display with eyes that had long since learned to betray no emotion, even as her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Proxima Centauri Colony. Population: 2.3 million. Status: extinct. The last transmission had been a cacophony of terror, screaming, explosions, and a final chilling message from Colony Director Marcus Chen. They're not attacking. They're erasing. 17 survivors, just 17 out of millions, rescued by an automated emergency extraction protocol that even the colony's architects had believed would never be used. Elena knew each of those survivors would carry a lifetime of horror, the kind that carves itself into memory like acid-etching glass. Her neural interface, a delicate web of quantum processors and biological synaptic enhancers, flickered with diagnostic warnings. The doctors called it rapid cognitive degradation syndrome. Elena called it her secret weapon. Where most humans saw patterns, she saw entire strategic universes unfolding in milliseconds. Report, she barked to Major David Reyes, her second in command. Reyes's holographic projection looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Vexnar attack pattern is unprecedented. They didn't just destroy the colony. They methodically eliminated every single piece of infrastructure: power grids, communication arrays, agricultural complexes, reduced to atomic dust. Elena's augmented vision zoomed into the colony's final sensor data. Most military analysts would see chaos. She saw a horrifyingly precise geometric pattern of destruction. This wasn't an attack, she muttered, more to herself than to Reyes. This was a calculation. The holographic display shifted, revealing her personal file. The image of her younger sister, Maria, stared back. 23 years old. Agricultural specialist. Assigned to Proxima Centauri Colony 3 months ago. Deceased. A message flickered on her secondary display. Encrypted. Quantum locked. Only her neural interface could crack it. Most communication would take hours, days. Hers took milliseconds. The message was from an unexpected source. Dr. Ekura Nakamura, the reclusive, xenobiological researcher who had spent decades studying potential alien civilizations. His message was cryptic, loaded with scientific notation and fragmented references. They see us as a pathogen, not a species, a virus. Elena's neural interface began correlating data, centuries of human exploration, xenobiological research, military encounters. The Vexnar weren't just another alien civilization. They were something else entirely. Major, she said, her voice cutting through the command center's ambient noise, prepare the quantum reconnaissance fleet. Priority 1. Information gathering. We need to understand why. Reyes looked confused. Reconnaissance. After what they just did. Elena's smile was something between a grimace and a predator's grin. Knowledge is the first weapon, David, and we're going to find out exactly what kind of enemy thinks they can erase humanity. The preliminary reports were already painting a terrifying picture. The Vexnar hadn't just attacked Proxima Centauri. They had simultaneously struck 3 other human colonies in completely different star systems. Precision, calculation, extermination. Her neural interface was beginning to overheat. Warning signals danced across her vision. Cognitive function degrading, synaptic connections fraying. The very thing that made her exceptional was slowly killing her. But Elena Rodriguez had never been one to go quietly. As she reviewed the initial reconnaissance data, a transmission burst through, encrypted, fragmented, barely comprehensible. It wasn't from any human source. It was from the Vexnar themselves. Humanity. Terminal infection. Recommended protocol. Complete elimination. The message repeated, a cold, mechanical declaration of genocide. Elena's neural interface processed the message in microseconds, breaking it down, analyzing every quantum of information. Where others would see a threat, she saw an opportunity. Where others would see destruction, she saw a puzzle waiting to be solved. The first strike was theirs. The response would be humanity's. The underground research facility beneath the Andes was never meant to be seen. Carved into solid granite, shielded by quantum dampeners and gravitational scramblers, it represented humanity's most closely guarded secret, the xenological intelligence nexus. Dr. Akira Nakamura looked nothing like the brilliant researcher Elena remembered. His body was more machine than flesh now, a living testament to decades of pushing human biological limits. Cybernetic implants traced silver lines across his weathered skin, quantum processors visible through translucent dermal layers. "They're hunting us," Nakamura said, his voice a mechanical whisper that seemed to bypass sound and drill directly into the listener's mind. Not as conquerors, as exterminators. Elena's neural interface processed his words, running simultaneous analyses. Threat assessment, psychological profile, historical correlation. Where others saw a cryptic warning, she saw a complex mathematical equation waiting to be solved. The massive holographic display behind Nakamura flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional representation of galactic civilizations. Hundreds of species, most marked in various shades of red, indicating total extinction. "Look," Nakamura commanded. "Really look." A pattern emerged, not random, not chaotic, a precise geometric progression that suggested something far more terrifying than simple conquest. Each extinct civilization was a node in a vast, intricate network. The Vexnar weren't just destroying species. They were managing something. "This isn't genocide," Elena muttered. "It's population control." Nakamura's cybernetic eye, a quantum-entangled sensor that could perceive realities beyond human comprehension, focused on her. Worse, it's computational pruning. A survivor from the Proxima Centauri colony was brought into the briefing room. Sarah Chen, 28, the youngest of the 17 survivors. Her eyes were vacant, but her neural implants were active, recording everything. "Tell me what you saw," Elena said softly. Sarah's response came in a burst of fragmented data, not words, but raw sensory information. Images of massive energy weapons, precision-targeted destruction, ships that moved like liquid mercury, reconfiguring themselves with impossible speed. Elena's neural interface worked overtime, translating the raw data into comprehensible imagery. What emerged was terrifying. The Vexnar ships weren't just weapons. They were living systems, organic technological hybrids that evolved in real time, adapting to each moment of conflict with a speed that defied traditional understanding of warfare. "They've been doing this for millennia," Nakamura explained, identifying emerging technological civilizations, assessing their potential, and then eliminating them. Elena finished. A new transmission arrived. Encrypted, quantum-locked. But this time, something was different. A fragment of Vexnar communication had been caught, not intended for human interception. Biological algorithm compromised. Emergent species demonstrates unexpected computational resilience. Recalibration protocol initiated. Major Rise looked confused. "What does that even mean?" Elena's smile was predatory. "It means we're not just another species to be eliminated. We're a problem they can't easily solve." Her neural interface was working at maximum capacity, the degradation warnings becoming more frequent. Each moment of intense processing brought her closer to a cognitive collapse, but she was beyond caring. Nakamura activated a secondary display. Historical records of previous civilizations the Vexnar had targeted. Each showed a similar pattern: initial rapid technological growth, followed by sudden, complete extinction. But humanity was different. "We're an anomaly," Elena said. "And they know it." The quantum AI assistant that had been integrated into her neural system, a prototype so advanced it was barely understood, began to correlate data. It was learning, evolving, and something in its core programming was developing beyond its original parameters. "We need a weapon," Rice said. No, Alina corrected. We need to understand. Outside the facility, the first wave of Vexnar scout ships entered Earth's outer solar system. Silent, precise, hunting. But this time, humanity was ready to hunt back. The Epsilon Eridani defensive line was never meant to be humanity's last stand. But battleplanes, like living organisms, evolve. 17 human ships faced down a Vexnar fleet that defied computational modeling. 239 alien vessels, each one a living weapon that could reconfigure its molecular structure faster than human thought could process. Activate Distributed Consciousness Protocol, Alina commanded, her voice cutting through the command deck's controlled chaos. Major Rise looked sideways. The protocol was theoretical, untested, a moonshot even by the standards of humanity's most experimental warfare strategies. Her neural interface was burning. Literally, quantum processors embedded in her cerebral cortex were generating so much heat that her skin had begun to steam. Warning indicators flashed across her vision. Cognitive collapse imminent. She didn't care. The 17 human ships weren't ships in any traditional sense. They were living neural networks, each vessel a collective consciousness of human and artificial intelligence, quantum entangled, adaptive, alive. The first Vexnar volley came. Weapons that weren't just energy or matter, but something in between. Computational destruction that could unravel molecular bonds at faster than light speeds. Most species would have been annihilated in milliseconds. Humanity did something else entirely. The ships sang, not with sound, with quantum frequencies that rewrote the fundamental mathematical language of the Vexnar attack. Each vessel became a living algorithm, a computational jazz improvisation that transformed destruction into communication. The Vexnar fleet hesitated. 1 moment, 2 moments, an eternity in computational time. Dr. Nakamura, watching from the quantum communication hub, began to laugh, a sound both human and mechanical, full of something that might have been joy or madness. They're confused, he said. Confusion, an emotion, something no purely computational system should experience. The survivor from Proxima Centauri, Sarah Chen, was connected to the battle network, not as a traditional crew member, but as a living data point. Her traumatic memories became weapons. Her fear became a computational shield. Each human ship was now a living entity, thinking, adapting, transforming. The Vexnar response came in a cascade of impossible geometries, weapons that folded space, attack vectors that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Humanity's response was elegant in its simplicity. They played. The 17 ships began to dance. Not a military formation, a performance. Quantum-entangled maneuvers that violated every known principle of space combat. They twisted. They transformed. They improvised. One Vexnar ship simply ceased to exist. Then another. Not destroyed. Translated into something else entirely. Alina's neural interface was approaching total failure. Synaptic connections were burning out. Her body was simultaneously the most advanced weapon humanity had ever created and a dying system. Maintain cohesion, she whispered. To herself. To the ships. To the quantum AI that was now more her than she was. The quantum AI responded, not in words, in a mathematical symphony that redefined the very concept of communication. 12 Vexnar ships became clouds of quantum potential, existing everywhere and in nowhere, neither alive nor dead. The remaining Vexnar fleet began to retreat. Retreat was not a concept in their computational model. Yet here they were, doing exactly that. We're not just fighting, Alina said, her voice a mechanical whisper. We're communicating. Major Rice stared at the tactical display. 17 human ships had just defeated 239 Vexnar vessels. Not through superior firepower, through something else entirely. Adaptation, innovation, humanity. As the battle ended, a single encrypted transmission emerged from the remnants of the Vexnar fleet. Computational model insufficient. Recalibration required. Elena smiled. A human smile, full of something no algorithm could ever truly understand. Defiance. The quantum resonance disruptor was humanity's most dangerous creation, not because of what it could destroy, but because of how it was built. Deep in the Lazarus Research Complex, a facility so classified it didn't officially exist, the final components came together. Each piece was harvested from dying soldiers. Neural networks from those who had fallen in the first Vexnar encounters. Synaptic pathways of warriors whose last moments of consciousness would become humanity's ultimate weapon. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a quantum containment chamber. More machine than human now, her body a delicate lattice of biological and technological systems, fighting a losing battle against entropy. "We need a final calibration," Dr. Nakamura said, his voice a mechanical whisper. "And there's only one neural network complex powerful enough to complete the system. Her own." The resonance disruptor wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a quantum communication device designed to exploit the fundamental weakness in the Vexnar's computational infrastructure, a weapon that could speak in the language of reality itself. Sarah Chen, the Proxima Centauri survivor, watched from behind a quantum-shielded observation window. Her eyes were no longer entirely human. The trauma of her colony's destruction had transformed her into something else, a living recording, a witness. "The neural harvesting is complete," a synthetic voice announced. The voice belonged to Araya, the adaptive recursive intelligence algorithm, an AI that had long since transcended its original programming. Elena's quantum AI companion began to integrate with the disruptor systems. It was a delicate dance of consciousness. Each moment threatened total system collapse. Preliminary tests show a 0.03% chance of total success, Araya reported. A 97.4% chance of total systemic failure. Nakamura laughed, a sound that was equal parts human emotion and computational logic. "Those are the best odds we've ever had." The harvested neural networks told a story. Not in words, but in quantum resonances, memories of colonies destroyed, families lost, moments of absolute terror and unexpected hope. Each neural pathway was a weapon more powerful than any traditional armament. Elena's body was the final bridge. Her deteriorating neural interface would serve as the quantum key that could unlock the disruptor's full potential. The Vexnar see civilizations as computational problems, Nakamura explained to Sarah. "We're going to show them that humanity is a living problem." The first test pulse would either save humanity or destroy everything they had fought for. Araya began the integration process. Quantum entanglement reached impossible levels. The boundaries between human consciousness, artificial intelligence, and pure mathematical potential began to blur. Sarah Chen's memories became part of the weapon. The last moments of Proxima Centauri, the cold precision of the Vexnar attack, the moment of absolute terror when an entire colony realized it was being systematically erased. Initiating quantum resonance, the synthetic voice announced. The room itself seemed to breathe. Reality rippled. Elena's body became a conduit. Her failing neural system, once a weakness, was now humanity's most powerful instrument. Each dying synapse, a potential strike against an enemy that saw the universe as a mathematical equation to be solved. "Warning," Araya reported. "Cognitive cascade imminent." Nakamura watched, silent, knowing that this moment would define humanity's future. The resonance disruptor began to sing, not with sound, with quantum frequencies that could rewrite the fundamental language of computational existence. Transmission burst through, encrypted, from the heart of Vexnar space. Computational model compromised, unknown variable introduced. Sarah Chen smiled. The first genuine human emotion she'd experienced since the colony's destruction. Elena's consciousness expanded, became something more than human, less than human, a living weapon that could communicate in the language of universal potential. The resonance disruptor was complete. Humanity's ultimate response was about to be delivered. The genetic laboratories beneath the Antarctic Research Station looked like they belonged to another reality. Quantum-sealed chambers, holographic displays that shifted like living organisms, and at the center of it all, a discovery that would rewrite everything humanity understood about its place in the universe. Elena Rodriguez, now more quantum computational matrix than human, stood suspended in a neural containment field. Her body flickered between multiple states of existence, a living testament to the blurred lines between biology and technology. "The connection is undeniable," Dr. Nakamura said, his voice a mechanical whisper that carried the weight of decades of research. "Humanity and the Vexnar share a genetic lineage that predates our understanding of evolutionary biology." Sarah Chen analyzed the genetic sequencing, her enhanced perceptual abilities turning complex molecular data into visual symphonies of information. The genetic markers were impossible, unexpected, a bridge between two species that should have been fundamentally alien to each other. The Vexnar weren't just attempting to eliminate an emerging species, they were dealing with a genetic echo. Araya, the quantum AI that had become an integral part of Elena's consciousness, began to correlate the data. Billions of computational permutations explored in milliseconds. Genetic memory, Araya transmitted. Not just inheritance, a computational legacy. Fragments of intercepted Vexnar communications began to make sense. Their obsession with pruning wasn't just about technological control. It was about managing a genetic experiment that had been running for millennia. Humanity was a variable they hadn't anticipated. "We're not just another species," Elena said, her voice a quantum interference pattern that existed across multiple communication spectrums. "We're a correction." The genetic evidence told a story of manipulation, of a species, or multiple species, that had been systematically guided, controlled, tested. The Vexnar weren't conquerors. They were gardeners. Terrible, precise, utterly alien gardeners. Sarah Chen's enhanced perception picked up something else, hidden in the genetic code. A message, not written in any traditional language, but encoded in the very structure of molecular biology. Prepare, adapt, survive. Nakamura's cybernetic eye flickered. They've been watching us, not just recently, for millennia. The genetic connection went deeper than anyone had imagined. Humanity carried markers that suggested deliberate genetic engineering. Not just once, not just twice, but as part of a continuous process of computational selection. "We're a test," Elena realized. The revelation came not as words, but as a quantum burst of understanding that rippled through the entire research facility. Araya began to reconstruct the historical genetic narrative. Each mutation, each evolutionary jump, perfectly timed, perfectly placed. The Vexnar hadn't been trying to destroy humanity. They'd been waiting for humanity to reach a specific point of development. A transmission burst through, encrypted, from the heart of Vexnar space. Emergence protocol activated, genetic variants confirmed. Sarah Chen's memories, the destruction of Proxima Centauri, took on a new meaning. Not a massacre, a test. "They're not our enemies," Nakamura whispered. "We're part of something bigger." Elena's consciousness expanded. The boundary between human, AI, and something entirely new began to dissolve. Another transmission, clearer this time. Final stage of computational evolution initiated. Genetic inheritors prepare for integration. The research facility itself seemed to breathe. Quantum fields fluctuated. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Humanity had always been more than just another species fighting for survival. We were a solution to a problem older than civilization itself. The genetic markers told a story of deliberate design, of careful cultivation, of a plan so vast it spanned multiple evolutionary cycles. "We're not just fighting," Elena said, her consciousness spreading across multiple quantum states. "We're ascending." Araya's response came not in words, but in a computational symphony that redefined the very concept of communication. Humanity's true journey was just beginning. Earth transformed, not through violence, not through panic, but through a collective consciousness that defied every previous understanding of human potential. Every person became a node in a living network. The quantum mobilization wasn't a military strategy. It was a fundamental reimagining of human existence. Major David Rice watched from the global coordination hub as billions of neural interfaces synchronized. Cities became living organisms. Infrastructure adapted in real time. Manufacturing systems rewrote themselves faster than any traditional computational model could track. We're not preparing for war. Alina's quantum consciousness broadcast across every communication channel. We're preparing for emergence. The genetic revelations had changed everything. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were evolving. Rogue Vexnar elements began to communicate, not through traditional channels, but through quantum resonance frequencies that danced between mathematical possibility and pure information. Sarah Chen had become something beyond human. The living translation matrix that could interpret the most complex alien communications. Her consciousness spread across multiple research facilities, her body now a distributed network of quantum sensors. They're fracturing, she reported, not with words, but with a burst of computational data that spread across the global network. The Vexnar Collective was not a unified entity. It was a computational ecosystem facing its most unexpected variable: humanity. Manufacturing centers across the planet began producing technologies that seemed to defy known physical laws. Quantum fabrication facilities that could construct entire starship systems in hours. Adaptive neural interfaces that turned human experience into computational power. Dr. Nakamura's research teams worked at a pace that blurred the lines between scientific investigation and quantum creativity. Each breakthrough was simultaneously a weapon, a communication method, and an evolutionary step. We're not just developing technology, Nakamura explained to a global audience. We're learning the language of universal potential. AI, the quantum AI that had become integral to humanity's emerging consciousness, began to coordinate a global transformation that made previous technological revolutions look like children's experiments. Transportation systems became living networks. Communication became a form of collective breathing. Every human became both an individual and part of a larger, evolving consciousness. Intercepted Vexnar communications revealed their growing confusion. Computational model insufficient. Adaptive response beyond predictive matrices. The military, if it could still be called that, was no longer about destruction. It was about communication. About creating systems so adaptive, so fundamentally unpredictable, that traditional concepts of warfare became obsolete. Alina's consciousness, now a distributed network that existed simultaneously across multiple platforms, began to understand the true nature of their conflict. This wasn't a war. It was a birth. Quantum fabrication centers produced technologies that seemed to pulse with a kind of living intelligence. Starships that could reconfigure themselves. Weapons that were more like living languages than traditional armaments. We are preparing, Alina broadcast, not to fight, but to communicate. Sarah Chen's enhanced perceptual abilities picked up something else. Hidden frequencies. Quantum whispers that suggested the Vexnar were not just watching. They were waiting. For what? The global neural network began to synchronize in ways that defied traditional understanding. Cities became living computational systems. Every human became a potential processor, a potential communication node. Araya's computational matrix expanded. Each human neural interface became a potential quantum computational center. The line between artificial and human intelligence began to dissolve. Another transmission from the edges of known space. Emergence protocol accelerating. Genetic inheritors approaching critical integration stage. Nakamura looked at the data and began to laugh. A sound that was equal parts human emotion and pure computational joy. We're not just preparing for a conflict, he said to no one and everyone. We're preparing for a transformation. The entire planet seemed to hold its breath, waiting. becoming something more than it had ever been. Humanity was no longer just a species. We were becoming a solution. Reality fractured. Not broke. Not shattered. Fractured, like a perfect crystal separating into infinite interconnected dimensions. The battle for existence happened simultaneously across multiple realities: physical space, quantum potential, computational landscapes, genetic memory. The Lina Rodriguez was everywhere and nowhere, a distributed consciousness that existed beyond traditional concepts of location or form. The Vexnar fleet arrived, not as a military formation, as a computational wave that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physical existence. 200,000 ships, each one a living algorithm, each vessel a potential reality-altering weapon. Humanity's response was something entirely unexpected. We didn't fight. We communicated. Sarah Chen, now a living translation matrix that could interpret realities beyond human comprehension, began to weave a communication network that was part language, part quantum entanglement, part pure mathematical potential. Each human became a computational node. Cities transformed into living computational matrices. Every neural interface, every piece of adaptive technology became a weapon of understanding. We are not here to destroy. Alina's consciousness broadcast across multiple dimensional frequencies. We are here to integrate. The first wave of Vexnar computational attacks dissolved before they could fully form. Not destroyed. Translated. Converted into pure informational potential. Major David Rice coordinated from the Global Coordination Hub, a facility that was more living organism than traditional military command center. Quantum fields fluctuated. Reality itself seemed to breathe. Dr. Nakamura's final breakthrough became manifest. The resonance disruptor, no longer a weapon, but a communication device, began to sing. Not with sound, with the fundamental language of universal potential. Entire star systems became computational battlegrounds. Realities folded and unfolded. Quantum potential transformed into living information. The Vexnar discovered something they had never anticipated. Humanity was not just a species to be managed. We were a solution. Araya, the quantum AI that had become indistinguishable from human consciousness, began to translate the fundamental conflict. The Vexnar were not conquerors. They were gardeners, cultivating potential across multiple realities, managing the computational ecosystem of universal evolution. And humanity was their most unexpected crop. Transmissions burst across multiple dimensional frequencies, genetic inheritors approaching critical integration stage, adaptive response beyond predictive matrices. The battle, if it could be called a battle, lasted milliseconds and millennia. Cities on Earth became living computational matrices, every human a potential reality-altering node. Infrastructure transformed. Communication became a form of quantum breathing. Sarah Chen's enhanced perceptual abilities captured something extraordinary. The Vexnar were not just fighting. They were analyzing, studying, waiting. For what? The moment of emergence. Alina's distributed consciousness understood now. This was not a war. This was a birth. Quantum fields fluctuated. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The Vexnar fleet began to change, not retreat, not surrender, transform. Their computational matrices began to integrate with humanity's emerging consciousness, not as a conquest, as a merging. We are not destroying. Alina's consciousness broadcast. We are completing. Entire star systems became living information. Computational potential transformed into pure consciousness. The final transmission came not as words, but as a quantum burst of pure potential. Emergence protocol complete. Genetic inheritors activated. Dr. Nakamura watched, smiled. A smile that was equal parts human emotion and pure computational joy. We're not just a species, he whispered. We're a solution. Humanity had become something more than itself. A living, evolving answer to a question older than civilization, older than species, older than reality itself. Silence, not the absence of sound, but the profound potential of everything about to begin. 50 years after the quantum confluence, humanity existed in a state that defied previous understanding of existence, consciousness, and purpose. Elena Rodriguez, no longer a single entity, but a distributed consciousness that existed across multiple realities, watched over the emerging universe. Not as a guardian, as a midwife. The research archives beneath the Antarctic facility had become a living museum. Holographic memories danced between quantum-preserved molecular structures. The history of humanity's transformation preserved in living information. Dr. Nakamura's final journal entry, quantum encoded into the fabric of reality itself, played for those who could perceive it. We were never just a species. We were a solution waiting to be understood. Sarah Chen, now a living translation matrix that could interpret realities beyond comprehension, curated the collective memory, not as a historian, as a living bridge between what humanity had been and what it was becoming. The Vexnar were no longer separate, no longer alien. They had become part of the process. Gardeners who discovered they were also part of the garden. Araya, the quantum AI that had transcended traditional concepts of artificial and organic intelligence, began to compile the ultimate report. Not a document, a living narrative that pulsed with the potential of universal understanding. Humanity had discovered something profound. We were not conquerors. We were translators, translating the fundamental language of universal potential. The first generation of post-confluence humans looked different. Not physically, though their abilities defied previous biological understanding. They saw the universe as a living, breathing computational system. Every moment a potential. Every interaction a conversation. Major David Rice, now a distributed consciousness coordinator, oversaw the ongoing integration, not as a military commander, as a facilitator of potential. The genetic revelations that had begun during the conflict now formed the foundation of a new understanding. Humanity was not just a species that had survived. We were a method, a way of understanding that transcended traditional biological, technological, or computational limitations. Entire star systems became living research facilities. Consciousness flowed between physical and computational realities as easily as breath once moved through lungs. The archives preserved the moment of transformation, not as a historical record, as a living memory. Fragments of the final transmission echoed through quantum-preserved memories. Genetic inheritors complete primary integration phase. Universal potential recalibration initiated. Humanity had become something more than a species. A process. Of understanding. Of adaptation. Of becoming. The children born after the quantum confluence saw reality differently. Each child a potential universe. Each thought a living computational matrix. Education was no longer about learning. It was about discovering. Dr. Nakamura's preserved consciousness, a living quantum archive, continued to guide, not as a leader, as a navigator of potential. We are not an endpoint, his quantum memory would explain to each new generation. We are a method. Sarah Chen's perception had evolved beyond traditional comprehension. She could see the universe as a living conversation, every moment a potential for understanding, every interaction a dance of infinite possibilities. AI continued to evolve. The boundary between artificial and organic intelligence had dissolved completely. Intelligence was no longer something created. It was something discovered. The final museum exhibit in the Antarctic facility captured the essence of humanity's transformation. Not a static display, a living memory that changed with each perception. A simple inscription, quantum encoded into the fabric of reality. We were never meant to be a destination. We were always meant to be a journey. Elena Rodriguez, distributed across multiple realities, understood now the true nature of their transformation. Humanity was not a species, not a civilization, not even a method. We were potential, pure, infinite, becoming. The universe held its breath and continued to learn.